I'm going to be asking you guys to produce 2 renders for this module, for this particular view. So I really it really just serves the purpose for you to understand how to actually create something like an evening render or a daytime render. So I need to make sure that you know how to create different time of day settings. So let's go over how to create and check what time of day you're actually rendering. So you're familiar with Rhino and its shade settings and the fact that it has a sun engine and you can turn on shadows and you can change the time of day. But you can also do that straight through Maxwell under the location and time. So I showed you this before. I just need to show it to you again to sort of reiterate and reinforce that that you can use this actively. However, in order to, oh, actually, this is just showing you where you are on the planet. But in order to activate seeing the shadows from Maxwell, you need to turn on shadows here in Maxwell to say show sun in viewport. And that way, when you switch your viewport over to rendered view, it'll show you the actual sun position relative to your model. So if I zoom out and you look at where the sun is coming in, if you change the time of day of the year, or the day of the year, you'll see the sun at whatever time I have set, which is pretty late in the day. I think it's like 7 something. There it is, 5:15. These are all the different days of the year and how much shadow is going to be cast. I'm going to keep it rather short, actually, like middle of the summer. And then the time of day here will change where the sun is coming from. So this is actually where the sun's going to be when you render. Okay, if you don't turn that on, you're actually getting the sun that you have set in Rhino. Okay, they're pretty close right now, but so yeah. Anyway, so I'm going to pick something kind of like, well, let me get a lower angle. There we go, something more like that. I think that's going to be sharp. And then we'll get back down into the view. Turn this on. Okay, I don't know why it's not showing that particular material. It's going right through it. That's super weird. Very, very weird. I didn't delete anything, did I? No. Okay. So anyway, so that's basically it for sun settings. But what you also need to know is how to actually set your camera, or rather your environment. So up until now, we've been working on constant dome or none. In some cases, we've turned on physical sky just to kind of see what it does to the rendering effect. But now we're actually going to use physical sun. The other part, or physical sky. The other part of sun control is that you have to check this box to say use sun. That activates everything for your sun settings. So the color temperature, or I should say the temperature of the sun, you notice that it's measured in K. Do you guys remember what K is? Huh? Kelvin, right? So that's your color temperature, and you can make it warmer or cooler, however you want to do it. So if I want something that's like a really yellow sun, some haze in the sky, something like that, I can turn my color temperature down. One thing that I do tend to do with sun is I tend to actually bump up the power a little bit, like a 1.1, just because I find that especially if you're increasing it a little bit at a base point, you can kind of go up and down a little bit more easily when you're in, well, I mean, it's easy anyway, you spin it, because you can go from 0 all the way up to 10. But I try not to mess with too much here in the panel, and then I'll mess with it in the Maxwell user interface. But anyway, I usually set it up a little high. The radius, I never mess with that, so I don't want to give you the wrong definition. But it's something that I never mess with, so I don't think we really need to use it too much. You can increase the intensity. Again, this is the 10% rule. We talked about this before. I wouldn't go too much higher than like a 1.10 or a 0.9 for your first test render, and then you can change it a little bit more here and there. One thing, since I'm doing kind of like a late day kind of render, is turbidity. You won't see too much of it in the background if the sun is behind you, but you see a lot of it when the sun is kind of in the render or if it's behind things that are in the background of your image. So I'm going to increase this to, we were at a 1.2, let's go to a 1.4. And other than that, I think I'm going to leave pretty much everything about the same. And I don't even think these are the defaults, but I don't want to mess with too much. I think the only thing that I really want to focus on is the color temperature, because that's going to give you a really intensely different feel in the render itself. All right, so we are set to production, multi-light intensity, that's good. Stick with the defaults on all these. These we can, so a lot of these elements we can actually modify afterwards, but you need to make sure that they're checked on. Like if you wanted to do devignetting or scattering or diffraction, you can change this kind of stuff afterwards in the render. But let's not mess with too much for now, and let's do a test render. Sorry guys, there's one thing I missed. If you go back to camera, yeah, camera. Okay, so one thing that is going to change how you set up your view, and actually you probably should start with camera every time you set up a render, but because I'm just doing viewport scale and resolution, I didn't. But these presets are going to change what happens with the lens of your camera relative to what time of day it is. Okay, so you set the time of day, and then you set what the preset is for the exposure. Do you know what exposure is? It's how much light is actually hitting and being absorbed by the film of the camera, right? So basically, how much light is going to be in the image. So you can set it for dark interior, bright interior, overcast interior, bright exterior, or night exterior. It's not that intense, but I'm going to set mine to bright exterior, and what you'll notice is that the f-stop and the EV have changed. We'll go into that when I go through like camera settings in great detail for, that's not going to be till the next module, but just stick to the defaults here, and then we'll start playing with those on a custom basis once we get into the next module. Okay, but if you're going to go to night exterior, it's going to make it nighttime. So you need to just be aware that you're going to have to rebalance your ISO and shutter because they're going to default to really intensely different numbers. All right, now let's do that test render. Okay, well, so because of the time of day I chose, I don't think you really saw much in terms of the color temperature of the sun. It's a lot more effective when it's in late day or early day. And sometimes you need to do it kind of drastically in order to make a difference on the image. But what I did want to point you out to, though, is your sun settings here. This is where it started off at 1.1 in the bottom right. If you increase that to like 2.2, you'll see that it already starts to get burnt out. So if I stop and refresh, that didn't refresh there. That's weird. The preview is burning it out a lot more. So it starts to wash out. So be careful about how much you're increasing your sun settings, because you're going to start to lose the definition of certain edges in your scene. So just wanted to make sure that you're well aware of that. Okay. Any questions about that so far? So remember that you can still modify your sky settings and everything right here after you're done. I would urge you to shy away from doing too much. Okay, you can really change the quality of your image. No other questions? All right.